Rakesh, you let me know when I can begin. Okay. All right. Hey, everyone. So we'll start with opening prayers, and then let's just talk a little bit about what we covered last time, just so we're on the same page, and then we'll get into new sections today. Okay. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti 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 Vakratunda Mahakaya Surya Koti Samhaprabha Nirvignam Kuru Me Deva Sarva Karyeshu Sarvada Saraswati Namastubhyam Varade Kamarupini Vidyarambham Karishyami Siddhir Bhavatu Me Sada Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. All right. So, was the section we were able to cover last time, hopefully, and tell me yes or no, that's what I'm looking for, that we covered the 8 elements of bringing the children to the doorsteps of Shastra, right? That I am an atheist is usually the typical answer from high schoolers. And so using the framework of Puja Gurudev's analysis of human evolution from animal man to man-man. Animal man meaning someone who lives by their instincts, by whatever emotions come up in their mind, living according to that and not using their higher intellect to judge if something is right or wrong. Not using that means we're no better than an animal. Therefore, we are animal man. So in students' case at that point, they are also just getting started with life, right? The newness of the world, the discipline or higher levels of thinking is not quite yet fully fleshed out. So naturally, they are also maturing in their lifestyle. So to help that maturity along, we need to start bringing to their minds relevant questions so they also become curious. Why do I need to become better? What is the fallacies of the way I'm living life currently that is not going to be healthy going forward? Just bringing up these topics, they will grasp it and be like, yeah, okay, yeah, those are questions to be asked. And they are far more vibrant in asking such questions than we are. It takes us a long time to get around to it. But as soon as you even put a thought with it, they'll run with it. So introducing to them, living a materialistic lifestyle, living like an animal, how great is it? Is it actually going to lead where it's supposed to? That begins the process of maturity. Then the second stage would be to show that if there's a higher way of living, then where do I get it from? Where are these guidelines? What to do, what not to do? How do I know what to do? So now we come to what is the source of answers we need in order to answer the questions that we presented in the first case. So there's a journey we have to take the students on every single year, re-emphasizing why living without any guidelines is going to lead to despair in their terms, in their ways of understanding the world, and then naturally leading them to why Shastra has become the best way to seek solutions. What does it have to offer that makes it so valid? And in last lecture I mentioned that often we disregard Shastra's awesomeness, that we say, science says this and Shastra also says this, therefore Shastra's is pretty cool. What are we doing then? We're putting science as a standard and saying, hey, Shastras come up to science, therefore believe it. But that's diminishing what Shastras really talk about. And I mentioned that there are questions that Shastras are able to answer that science has not even yet figured out to learn to ask. Because, for example, even if you take astronomy, right? They've learned the mechanisms of the universe, but they're not able to identify who's the source. Why does it work like this? Who created or designed it? Or what is the cause of all this design? Where does gravity come from? They have analyzed the mechanisms of gravity, but they haven't been able to find the source of gravity. Shastras start with that question and then go forward. So the classic example I take to re-emphasize this idea that Shastras are accommodating questions we haven't even thought of to ask is Kena Upanishads itself, where Western philosophy, especially the roots of science itself, comes from philosophers, Greek philosophers, Roman philosophers, and European philosophers, right? That's the origin of science in today's form. So those philosophers would ask questions, especially Descartes, or I have to remember who this was, but they mentioned that because I think, therefore I am. Do you remember who said that? Or it was Descartes, right? Yeah. I think, therefore I am. And what was his premise? That because I am able to recognize the world and because I'm able to have thoughts, it is proof that I exist. Shastra says, dude, it's the other way around. That because I exist, I give life to this instrument called mind, and therefore it's able to have thoughts. So my existence is independent of thinking. So really, it's I am, therefore I think. And this concept comes in Kena Upanishad with the very question that the student asks. And it's a very highly intelligent question. It says, there are objects. What's behind the objects? This equipment of sight. Because it is with these eyes that I can recognize this object. Now what's behind the eyes? It is the manas, the emotional aspect of the mind that is able to put together all the data points and present it to the intellect. So behind the object is eyes, or the organs of perception. What is behind the organs of perception? The manas. What is behind the manas who takes all this data and makes decisions? The intellect. That first question is, what is that which is behind even this intellect? This is the question by the student, which is far more advanced than Descartes' premise saying, I think, therefore I am. So this is an example to show that there are questions that Shastras are able to answer that science has not yet even learned to ask. So this is the reason I'm putting emphasis or giving these examples, because we want to impress upon our students that we need to have Shraddha in our Shastras. It has greatness to give us. We have to give it an opportunity to show us that. Because the way the students typically approach Shastra is, it's all religious, it's all superstition, it's things that my parents tell me I need to do. They themselves don't understand, why should I believe you? So it's that negative judgment of the Shastras that prevent them from even opening the doors to find out what it's all about. So I'd read in the quote last week that, let us see what Shastras have to offer. And when I study it well, I shall declare to the world the truth it has. If it's bad, I will declare it. If it's good, I will declare it. That very premise saying, I want to give the Shastras an opportunity to show me what it has. And I'll give it a fair chance. That fair chance attitude is what we also have to instill in our kids and change. So this idea of, I may not be living my life well, it may lead to disasters. There should be an alternative. Where does those solutions come from? And why should I trust the Shastras to offer me those solutions? These three things have to be the first day of class, honestly. Because without this mental shift in the student, nothing will be accepted. One of the biggest things is, we as teachers want to do that for our students, but honestly speaking, we have to do that for ourselves, don't we? We are only enabled to speak well in class and show and demonstrate and all the good teacher techniques until and unless I believe that myself. So if there's any gaps or weaknesses or insecurities in my teaching, only tells me that there's a weakness in my own experience. So we have to come around and think for ourselves, what parts of Shastras do I struggle with to believe? So that was one of the reflection questions I left with, for you at the end of that video last time. That what parts of Shastras do I myself have doubts about? And when it doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be related to a topic I have in class. It could be anything. But applying myself in trying to grow in my own mindset, attempting to research, read more, learn more, and allowing it to be practiced by my own personality in my day-to-day life, if I can do that cycle of exercise once, it will speak volumes in all other topics I take up. So I have to be the first student before I become the teacher. And this is part of that experiential student, not just a book student, right? We have to go through that first, and that's the greatness of being a teacher. Because students keep me accountable, I become a better student. And that's the beauty of being a teacher. So then we dove into the ideas I presented there were built off of the content that Puja Gurudev gives in Art of Living. I believe Art of Living is an older copy. I found out that they don't publish this specific book anymore. However, the content is also presented again in Kindle Life. The chapters may be a little bit out of order, but it's the same chapters. Like you'll see the same paragraphs and verbiage, so that's another place to look for it. And I have also discovered that some of these are also come up in self-unfoldment. It may not be in the same order, but the same ideas in certain sections and chapters have repeated themselves in self-unfoldment as well. So as teachers, if we want the book to study after this, I would suggest if you can't get a copy of Art of Living, Kindle Life should be available, and Self-Unfoldment is also available. Those are great books to always have as our cornerstones in our library for study. So in Kindle Life, we had seen Puja Gurudev talk about how in spite of man having harnessed the phenomenal world, we still suffer. And we suffer mostly because we don't have discipline. And as soon as we hear the word discipline, we revolt. So it is coming around to the idea of understanding why discipline is such an important foundation to sadhana. Anything I pick up is all founded upon the art of discipline. So that was the chapter called Freedom versus Licentiousness. That word always gives me trouble. And it is also the very first chapter of Self-Unfoldment called Freedom. Then that next chapter, when we talked about the difference between licentiousness and freedom, it was coming in the chapter called Art of Right Conduct. Then we also saw the nature of mankind, called man's heritage. And we talked about how even though our true nature is divine and independent, there's a reason why he uses the word independent. It is independent joy. We are confused about the very source. I think the analogy that I'd taken was like a monkey trying to stick its hand in a box with a very tiny hole, right? That, oh, there's sweets inside the box, I need to get it. But really that hole is the caveat of living in a materialistic life. Because I'm going after the world of, the objects of joy in the world, it's only limited joy. It's not independent, unlimited, forever freedom, forever happiness. It is limited. It is dependent on that object. Holding on to that, if I try to become free, meaning I want to experience the unlimited happiness in a limited object, I'm going to get stuck. It's not going to work. Until I let go of a false idea, will I truly recognize the truth. So that analogy is, it's like a monkey sticking its hand in the box, trying to grab sweets and only getting stuck because he's still holding on. And until he lets go, the fist can actually then come back out of that box. So this is the challenge that we as sadhakas have to go through in redefining our relationship with the world. Then we saw the secret of success in life is to make sure that we always keep our head above our emotions, right? That in order to deal with letting go of the world, there's a lot of gunk that my mind and my emotions will throw up. It doesn't want to let go. I'm addicted to it. I have to keep my intellect even higher than any storms that challenge will come up to tell it, no, this is a lower way of thinking. I want to reach the highest, so I better start having discipline to let things go. We need to always keep our head above that water. And that would be the secret of success. And at the end, we had seen Puja Gurudev talk about the state of someone who's successful in this, what it's like for them. That they are mighty stalwarts who stood amongst the storms of life as firm as the Himalayas. They're the guiding light for everyone else. They're the proof of what Shastras has to offer. They become the guide. So now we will keep investigating what motivates us in the day-to-day life that is not going to be the success we think we're going to get. So this is now coming in chapter 4 called Joy of Life. Joy of Life. And so Puja Gurudev here says, for any action that we perform, there's usually one of two motivators we have. One motivation is a revulsion to sorrow. I want to get away from some things that I hate. And if you were there in today's assembly, we saw in chapter 5 the definition of a sannyasi. Not someone who's like a stone and who acts like a sannyasi on the outside. What is their state of mind? Their state of mind is nirdvandvaha. They are not affected by the duality, dvandva, two. And what are the two? Is specifically, na kankshati, na dveshti. Kankshati means desires, I have to have. Or dveshti, I hate it, I don't want it. By the way, this right here is the two motivating factors that when I'm living like an animal, I will live according to these two motivations. I will try to get away from things I hate, dveshti. I will try to run after the things I want, kankshati. So we rearrange the world to match this. When I say we rearrange the world, think about it from layers upon layers. Start with myself. If I don't like myself in the way I look, don't we try to rearrange that? I buy different clothes, I put on different makeup, especially our high schoolers. They will try different fashion trends just to look different. Because there might be an underlying, I don't like the way I look. Or in our rooms, bedrooms specifically, right? This is where I spend my peaceful time, where I'm not stressed about anything. I get to go to sleep, I get to lounge around, or living room in front of the TV, or kitchen, where if we really like food, they become like zones in our house that we often spend time in. So we are constantly fussing over comfort in those places, right? I love coffee, but I don't want to sit there and manually grind coffee grounds like olden days. I don't want to spend the time to boil the water on the stove. I don't want to spend time waiting for the water to seep through the coffee. I wish I had a certain kind of milk because it's got to taste right. And on top of that, coffee, milk, and sugar, that's a baseline. Like, what else is there? Even, like, look at how refined our rearrangement can be all about. Now what do we have? These giant espresso machines with like dynamic, what do you call it, sifters that have to make sure it's an even layer of coffee to get that rich cappuccino. And then you have like Starbucks, like a full line of flavors. Caramel, hazelnut, creme brulee. I saw another one, hot chili pepper. And I'm like, are we dealing with a meal or a coffee? How much endlessly do we fuss and rearrange? That's within our own house. Now, how do we fuss and rearrange our relationships? And I'm not talking about higher elevated ways of thinking, because as we go through satsang, as we grow, our own relationships will change. Those that don't grow with us, we will disconnect from them. And as we go, we might become attached to new groups. That's a different line of thinking. But when we live like animals, oh, they insulted me, how dare they? My ego was affected, and so we start cutting off relationships that way. Or we look at other people and start judging them. oh, they're only like this, so I can use them this way. This art of manipulation, all is about fussing around relationship centered around the ego and what it wants and doesn't want. Then when it comes to the entire world, now let's think from a national standpoint and a global standpoint. The innovations, the momentums, today's achievements, what are they all motivated by? We have inconveniences. I want to change that on a global scale, for a massive scale. Let's do things. And Puja Gurudev says, even a worm is motivated by revulsion to sorrow or cravings for joy, even in eating and shitting. I apologize for the word I used, but that's the imagery that's being given in that book. Even a worm whose only motivation or life surrounds that act of living, even they are motivated by these two. So let us not underestimate overcoming this. So the methods may change, but the goal is the same in terms of these two motivations. How I run away from sorrow and how I run towards joy, there's an infinite permutation and combinations, but these motivations remain simple between these two. So the current assumption in our way of living is that the world of objects will give me happiness. And especially in the more advanced version, the more money I have will be more happiness, right? Money buys happiness. We'll say, nah, it's not. I know it's just a cliche phrase. Money doesn't actually buy happiness. But if we look at our own lifestyle, we believe that money will bring us happiness. That if I can get more comfort. So some of the examples are, more money equals better things equals happier life. Or another way is with the better things in terms of food. Cuisines also get more elaborate. Going to restaurants, we want to push the boundaries of experiencing food, right? Money buys that experience. When it comes to comforts, the things I have, using Uber to deliver things because I don't want to go outside. The conveniences we start to build, that is bought by money. Or experiences in terms of entertainment. I have time off. What do I do with myself? Like, what do I want? Isn't it right? That's the first question we start to ask. What do I want? And how much money do I need to get it? So again, it is the inbuilt function that we do without even thinking, that more I have, especially in the form of money, the more things I can get, the happier is my life. And we function like that without even thinking about it. But too familiar, and this is a quote from the book itself, too familiar with the striking contradiction of a millionaire sitting and mourning in his palatial apartment. Isn't it true that even if we have come into this first world country, we experience so many more comforts, can we say, I am now rid of all sorrows and I have all the happiness in the world? Can I truly say that? Don't we still have hunger for something or the other? So this is a state that we have never actually achieved through these methods. And I think I forget where it comes from, but there's a story where Naraji approaches Kuber. Kuberji is the Devata of wealth, right? He's the accountant of the Devatas. And, or was it Yamash? I have to remember. But the story goes that Naraji would bring a bowl saying, are you able to fill this? He would bring regular containers and Kuberji was able to fill it. But then he brought a special container, and this special container, nothing he put would be able to fill this. And what was that container? The human skull. Saying that the human mind has never found fulfillment by constantly filling it. The idea comes back to this, that seeking happiness in the world outside for permanent happiness is not the solution. It is an endless game, endless chase that will never end. Why? Why is this a useless game? Because even that same object will give two different experiences to two different individuals. The example Puja Gurudev takes in the book is the cigarette fills one with joy and at the same time another is driven away with annoyance. I have a personal experience of this because my neighbor has a regular schedule of smoking, and the wind directly takes from his porch into my window. So I can literally set my clock to the smell. So it's funny that they need it. They are disciplined about smoking, and yet every day it annoys me, and I'm like, can I please, I need air, but I can't have this kind of air. Same object, two different experiences. So my belief that joy comes from the object in the world is invalidated by examples like this. And the other classic example is, forget two different people. One person, same object, can have two different experiences with the same individual. Why? Because my likes and dislikes can change on a dime. I liked caramel yesterday, but I want hazelnut today. I don't want it anymore. If you love khichdi, I know some people have said that when they were growing up in villages in India, the classic comfort food is like plain khichdi with like pickle on the side and ghee, and they say, oh, I could eat that every day. Shall we put it to the test? Every meal, and I have a yupster here, and we challenged them for 1 week. What was it? Khichdi and monam. Khichdi for lunch and dinner, no salt too. Oh, that's hard. That's hard. Now, okay, if you don't like no salt, how about I put a ton of salt in there? No, that's too much. Again, constantly fussing and readjusting. Nothing lasts. Because my pursuit of all this will end when I come. Okay, I have to be mindful of the wire. That my pursuit of happiness will come when I have satisfaction and fulfillment. In these pursuits, is satisfaction and fulfillment coming from objects then? There's way too many evidence that there's contradictory experience coming from this. So objects of the world cannot give me permanent happiness. And whenever I think of permanent happiness, I always come back to Puja Gurudev's motto for Chinmay Mission. Maximum happiness for the maximum number of people for maximum number of time. If I have to accomplish that, that will not come from the world outside. It has to come from understanding my true nature, and therefore Vedanta becomes the hallmark of Chinmay Mission. Once I started reading Vedanta, even little quotes from Puja Gurudev, I realized he has shastras inbuilt into phrases even like that. What is the one thing that will give us maximum happiness for everyone? When we say maximum number of people, we mean every single individual for maximum number of time, past, present, and future. All yugas, all time of experience. How can someone give happiness like this? When we have reconnected to the truth of our own true nature. So even in that phrase, Puja Gurudev has mentioned Satyam. Brahma Satyam in that very phrase. So examples like this challenges our assumptions. If joys were in the object itself, then should it not have given the same quantum of happiness? I would have had it and have been satisfied for the rest of my life. So happiness, now we can say, is not in the object itself. Okay, but you can't ignore the fact that I still get excited or I still get sad, I still go through these things. So then, where is it? What's going on? There's still something, it may not be the object itself. So Shastras say that the answer is, happiness is a subjective phenomenon. Happiness is a subjective phenomenon. It is related to the state of mind. It is related to the state of mind. And here's the principle. The more the mind is agitated, the more we experience sorrow. The more tranquil the mind is, the more happiness we experience. Agitation and tranquility are the two states, and that will give rise to the experience of joy and sorrow. So, therefore, happiness is measured by the tranquility of mind, not in the number of things I have or the number of experiences I go through. How tranquil is my mind? How many of you have heard my eczema example, the itching example? Maybe once, yeah, right? I use it often because I really can't get rid of it. There's no other way I can think of to explain this. Where if I have eczema, itchiness, that's the problem. It's an agitation, right? That agitation creates sorrow for me, this upsetness. But if I try scratching it, which is like going after the objects of the world, trying to gain infinite happiness or unlimited happiness through limited objects. It's a really dumb approach. It's like scratching that eczema. By scratching, I may feel temporary relief, but really what I'm doing is creating more scars and more itching. So it's an endless itching game. It's an endless pursuit. What's the real solution for it? I have to bring that agitation down for real. Meaning I need to go to the source. What is agitating? Is it poison ivy? Let me go cure it. Is it an allergy? Let me cure it. Is it a skin condition that has to be? We go to the root cause. We want to cure the eczema. Let's go to the real source of where is happiness. Let me gain it from there. That takes discipline, does it not? Don't itch it. Don't scratch. That's us having discipline like we talked about in the last section. Don't scratch. Have the discipline not to go after the world of objects because it gives room in the mind to go after where the real source is. If we stop wasting time here, we now have enough energy to go over there. So now our focus should be not in the world outside, but we need to start paying attention to the state of our mind. Now our science has shifted, has it not? We need to now study the mind. So quietening the mind at will is the unique capacity man has without depending on the objects. This is a direct sentence from that book, and I'm highlighting it because we have to look through each part of that sentence. Quietening the mind is one aspect, right? Just getting it to slow down, but added to it, at will. The only time right now I've experienced a quiet mind is when I'm in deep sleep. I'm not even talking about dreaming. Deep sleep is the only time I'm able to have a quiet mind. But it's not under my control. It is this state of ignorance that I've gone into. Quietening the mind at will. So that's two aspects we have to look at, is the unique capacity of man. So again, he comes back to the difference between animals and humankind. Last class I had mentioned that Vivek Chudamani starts with this glorification of humankind. That of all the species, it is a privilege to be born as a human. And of all the humans, it is a privilege for those that have come to the path of dharma. That actually have the tenacity and capacity of the mind. There's a step in between. They have control over their own mind. It reminds me of CEOs, right? Those that are really successful in life, if you look at how they were achieved, these life coaches that explain to you how did they become great, you can see they have immense control over their own mind. Mind over matter. Discipline. It is that control of will. Even they have it. They may not be spiritual. They may not be coming to the experience that world doesn't have happiness for. They're not there yet. And yet they have control over their mind. So quietening the mind at will is a unique capacity of man. And it is far more of a privilege that awesome human being who has that capacity to control their mind applies themselves to the path of dharma. And it is even more unique that they take it up to investigation of the highest, and it is even more rare for them to finally realize their own true nature. It's a sequence, given how privileged and rare that occurrence is to really walk up that ladder of evolution. So, again, coming back, quietening the mind at will is a unique capacity of mankind. And the last phrase, without depending on objects. Because if we look back, why is it we're constantly addicted to the world of objects? Let's go back to desires, right? Desires, if I don't have it, it's that itching. It's that it builds. I have to have it. I can't live without it. I need to have it. I want to have it. I should have it. It builds over time. And what is that doing to the state of mind? Building agitation. Therefore, the more desires I have, the more agitations I have, therefore the more sorrow I experience. Just having desires means I'm experiencing sorrow. How does going after that object and finally getting it feel good? Ah, I have it. Desires has stopped. Therefore, temporarily, that agitation has decreased. Therefore, I feel happiness. But is it a true, like, I am satisfied, like, I don't need anything else? It's never come to that point. It's just like the tides of the ocean. It just builds and, and comes back down, builds and comes back down. But there's never really a cessation of it all. I have more desires, therefore I rearrange the world around me, and then I get a sense of relief. But it never truly goes away. Now I want more. In our Shastras, it says Kama leads to Krodha and Lobha. It's like two branches. Krodha means anger, meaning when my desires are not fulfilled, the natural instinct I'll get is anger. Why don't I have this? I need to, it builds. But if I do get it, what develops from there? Lobha, greed. I need to have more. It goes back to that skull example, and it also goes back into our self-unfoldment, where Puja Gurudev writes that equation. Happiness equals the number of desires fulfilled divided by number of desires entertained. The happiness quotient. So I'll repeat that again if you want to take note. Happiness equals, the numerator is number of desires fulfilled, number of desires fulfilled divided by the number of desires entertained. So we're going to go into math class a little bit here, just for a second. So if, let me just also write this down for a second. The principle is that if my happiness numerator increases, so let's say I have 3 divided by 4, right? 3 divided by 4. I have 3 desires that I fulfilled, and I have 4 desires that I'm entertaining. If I did that, what is it? 75%, right? Now, if I were to decrease my denominator, the number of desires I've entertained, so I go from 3/4 to 3/2. What's my quotient now? 1.5. I just went from 3/4 to 1.5 now, all by reducing my denominator. But you're like, yeah, but if you increase your numerator, you'd get that same increase. Okay, so let's do that math. You have, well, the first one was 3/4, right? So I'm going to leave the denominator alone. I will increase number of desires fulfilled. Now it's 4/4. What is the quotient now? 1, like 100%. So we went from 75% to 100%. But there's one caveat that Puja Gurudev says about this equation. If I increase the numerator, it has to also increase my denominator because I constantly want more. These desires will never end because of just fulfilling it. So instead of saying 4/4, if I increase the numerator by 1, I have to increase the denominator by 1. So now I have 4/5. Now I'm even worse. I can't do that math in my head right away. But so this is the interesting quotient that Puja Gurudev gives in self-unfoldment related to this. Dependency on objects is a sentence it's related to. That the more I fulfill, the more I will end up entertaining. The only way to stably increase my experience of happiness is to reduce the number of desires I entertain. That is becoming independent of objects. So again, this I'm like really circling the sentence again and again because just sitting with it and we reflect on it will bring so much insight as we keep going. The goal is the state of mind to experience happiness is to experience tranquility. Tranquility comes from quietening the mind, and that has to be done at will. This is a unique capacity of the humankind without dependency of objects. So I'll repeat the whole sentence a little bit more smoothly so that we can really digest the words. Quietening the mind at will is a unique capacity man has without dependency on objects. So the scriptures help awaken this ability to quieten the mind without this dependency on object, to discover what does it mean to have permanent, fuller happiness and perfection itself. This is where we're headed. This is what the Shastras are prescribing to be able to achieve. In adult satsang, I'm taking Sadhana Panchakam. This is one of the last scriptures or advice or statements, teachings that Adi Shankaracharya ji gave before he attained Mahasamadhi. This was his last instructions. But it is, in our Vedanta course, the first thing we take up. Because it's such an introductory, such a great map to start with. Once we have the map, then I can say, okay, along this route I need to work on this, along this route I need to work on that, this is where I'm going. We need a map first. Sadhana Panchakam became that map. And what is Sadhana Panchakam doing? It comes back to this. The scriptures help us awaken this ability to quieten the mind without dependencies of objects. So this is the beautiful solution and framework or alambana support that the Shastras are able to give us. But it takes time for us to come around to the value of this until we have encountered the reality of, is chasing life and objects worth it? Later on, the next section we'll see, and I don't have time now, but I'm just giving you a tidbit next time. We're going to be tackling the chapter called The Dual Path. And at every junction of life, we have two options. See, I heard the, yep. Shreyas or preyas. Path of good or path of, not bad, path of pleasant. Very interesting. You would automatically think, okay, good and bad and ugly. You know, we have that classic phrase, what is it, Clint Eastwood, good, bad, and ugly. Good and bad is what we think the structure is, but it's really not that. It is the path of good versus the path of pleasant. Path of pleasant is related to this idea we talked about, that the pursuit of happiness in the world outside is cheap happiness. It is the path of pleasant. It won't work. What is this better way of living life? That is the path of good, and we will see more of that in the next chapter. And we will see tidbits from Kathopanishad where this idea actually comes from. So with that, thank you so much. We'll do closing prayers. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om.